Let's get back to the Titans and the Texans. Houston, 7-4, first in the AFC South, coming off of that 34-10 win at Jerry World in prime time, and the offense was rolling. Joe Mixon went off. I know we already showed one touchdown from him. He had 3 rushing touchdowns in one game. Nico Collins, by the way, his first game off of IR. Houston, a lot better when he's on the field. 5-1 when Collins plays this season. 2-3 when he doesn't. Speaking of the offense, here's more from CJ Stroud on the win over Dallas and what changes needed to be made on their end.
I believe, every game is an opportunity to go out and fix problems. So that was a problem that we had, got to score more touchdowns. And honestly, we could have been better today in the red zone. So there's always something you can correct and fix. So I'm excited, and blessed to be able to go back to work and be healthy and be able to go back and, fix those problems and play the Titans this week.
McCarthy is joining us now, who is going to be on the call for Titans Texans. And we just heard Stroud say there, hey, we need to score more touchdowns. We can be better in the red zone. We could have been better versus Dallas. If I'm a Houston Texans fan and I'm watching them blow out their in-state rival 34-10, I'm thinking, hey, we're pretty good. But I guess that's what you want to hear from your quarterback, that you can always be better, Tom.
Yeah, Jacqueline, I think one of the problems they've had is the fourth quarter issues of scoring touchdowns. They did get the 1-yard touchdown run from Joe Mixon the other night, but it had been 4 games since they had a fourth quarter or second half touchdown. So it was 19 possessions coming into that game against the Cowboys. So to improve on that would be huge. This is a really interesting matchup because the Titans have so many conference games coming up or divisional games coming up before the end of the season, whereas the Texans can kind of put things away. But I think you saw something in that report that you guys talked about. The fact that Nico Collins is back, there's such a different offense when he's there and he's able to extend the field, particularly with Stephon Diggs being out with the ACL injury. I mean, Nico Collins back again this past week against the Cowboys. They can stretch it to be able to open up the field for guys like Dalton Schultz right there, where they can throw the ball underneath to give it to Tank Dell. He's not getting the same kind of numbers that he had last year per game, but still could be effective. So I think that's a huge deal that he's back for them as a receiver.
Totally, and we're going to talk more about that in just a moment. But first, I want to talk about the Texans in regards to their path to the playoffs, because as of right now, they're essentially a lock, about a 96% chance to win the AFC South. When you look at this team and those big playmakers starting to come back, I should say, how do you think this Houston team stacks up with other big guys in the AFC?
Well, I think they have a really good chance of going deeper into the postseason. They won 1 game last year. I think they can do a little bit more this year. I think when they get Will Anderson back, and he's starting to practice now for them on the defensive end, I think that's going to be a huge boost for them. Now, there's no doubt that 1 and 2 are the upper echelon of the AFC. In fact, the Bills may have catapulted themselves into, one of the top 2 or 3 teams in all of the National Football League after their victory over the Chiefs, particularly the way they were able to beat the Chiefs. But I think the Texans, as they continue to get healthier, are going to be a handful for anybody. They usually have that first Saturday game in the wild card. They may not have that game. They may not have that first Saturday game because I think people like to watch them play. So as long as they can get healthier on the defensive end, I think the secondary's coming on and getting stronger. Petrie with this play right here was huge against the Cowboys. I thought that reset the tone in the second half, and then Barnett scoring off the fumble. So that's part of where I think they need to progress. I mean, look at the numbers. They've progressed this year. And I think they're just going to get better as they get healthier.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about Will Anderson Jr. in just a moment. But when we're sticking to the quarterbacks here, because it's kind of a 2023 quarterback draft class reunion with CJ Stroud and Will Levis. And it's interesting when you look at a lot of the quarterbacks, or most of them that came out of that class, it's kind of a roller coaster with Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, Bryce Young. But CJ Stroud is just so above the rest in terms of production, Tom. What does that have to say about CJ Stroud, that he's just in a completely different category than these other quarterbacks in that same draft class?
I will say that last year, meeting with all of them, I found myself being more impressed with how C.J. Stroud was able to read defenses more than anybody else, and I think that's sort of progressed. Now, his numbers aren't as good this year as they were last year. He's got more giveaways this year already than he had all of last season, and I think that's something that he's trying to tighten up a little bit. They've complimented him with Joe Mixon in the backfield. I think that really helps. But I just still think his decision-making exceeds everybody else. I think Levis's toughness exceeds everybody else. But I think C.J. Stroud's decision-making exceeds everybody else that came out in that class. And, I think he was a surprise for everybody last year. I think teams have started to figure him out. I think they're pressuring him more. In fact, he's pressured more than any other quarterback in the AFC. But I do think he's able to kind of read that and be able to see defenses better than a lot of other quarterbacks.
Now, what about Will Levis? Because there were some bright spots even last season. I think it was like week 7 or something against the Falcons, and we've seen some flashes of what he can do, but also some very, very questionable decision making as well. What do you hope to see from Will Levis in this matchup?
Well, I love his toughness, and I think you even saw that in the Minnesota Vikings game, because he does not bounce back, or he does not stop himself from taking those hits, which is obviously why he had a shoulder problem earlier this season. But I do think this play right here is an indication of what he can do. He can find the deep ball. In fact, after this touchdown pass of 98 yards, which was on 3rd down, and they almost had a safety prior to that, he had another long potential touchdown pass to Calvin Ridley that was called back because of penalties. That's where they've been hampered, are the penalties. But I think he's progressing, and I think if you can get a better running game for him, then I think it's going to make him a better quarterback in the National Football League.
I want to circle back to Nico Collins, Will Anderson Jr., because you mentioned it. This offense is a lot better. It's very different when Nico Collins is out there. It opens up. Also, Will Anderson Jr. coming back to practice. He might make his debut in this matchup as well. Just how much more dangerous as a whole is this team when we have guys like that are healthy as we're coming down the stretch here in the season?
I think the sky is the limit when they have the ability, and I think particularly from a defensive standpoint with Will Anderson, because they've got some veteran guys on the opposite end that he is going to complement and has already complemented and will continue to grow with. So to me, it's a big deal that he's coming back. I thought with C.J. Stroud being so good as a first-rounder last year, that sometimes people forgot about how good Will Anderson was as a first-rounder last year. So I think he's one of those young players that teams have to identify when it comes to week in and week out in the National Football League. And then with Nico Collins, I still think the deep threat for somebody like Stroud is really important, but I think it opens up so much more with the tight ends, with Dalton Schultz and with Tank Dell, and even with Robert Woods, the perennial veteran. I think it opens things up for him on an underneath version. And I think you look at these numbers. I mean, he was leading the National Football League in total yards before the injury. He's still leading in yards per game because he's averaging over 100 yards per game. I just think he makes a really big difference. He's evolved just as the Texans have evolved.
Still leading, and he was on the IR for 4 weeks. It's incredible. Tom, we certainly appreciate it. Enjoy the game. As mentioned, Tom is going to be on the call for this matchup on CBS and is part of the Week 12 slate. Chiefs, Panthers, Bucks and the Giants, Titans and the Texans, of course. And you can watch all these matchups on CBS, but also streaming on Paramount Plus as well. And Thanksgiving going to be here right around the corner. Make sure you tune in to CBS for a Thanksgiving classic. Bears, Lions, 12:30 Eastern. And, of course, you can stream that one on Paramount Plus as well.